Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the summer series of the Property Couch podcast, mate, and welcome back to you. How was the Christmas pudding?
The Christmas put a bit of weight on the bell.
Put a bit of weight on
the belly. Put a bit of weight on, and a couple of quiet frothies as well. That probably didn't help.
Yeah.
No. Look, I've been very fortunate, as you know, Bryce. I've had a pretty wonderful 50th year on this planet. So there's a lot more that are doing it a lot tougher than me, and so I thank my lucky stars that I'm in the position that I'm in. But yeah, so to everyone who's had a good year, terrific. For those people who haven't, well, guess what? 2022 is right on the doorstep. So time to rebound then.
As my dad would say, if you didn't have a good year this year, it's on again next year. So have another go.
Have another go,
which is great. Hey, we have got another awesome financial transformation conversation today, Ben. We had a conversation with a man who has got some extraordinary life experience that we can share through this conversation. And I'm looking forward to sharing the chat that we had with Brad, and then you and I'll circle back at the end for a bit of a summary. But let's cut to the conversation we had previously with Brad. All right, Ben, we've got a very special guest today on this episode of the summer series. We are chatting with Brad Rath. Welcome to the Property Couch, Brad.
Thanks guys for having me. Good to be on here.
No, it's a pleasure. It's always good to chat to a fellow sandgroper over there in Perth. So nice to chat with you. Now, the first question we want to know from you, Brad, is just give us a little bit of an insight into what money management was like for you growing up over the dinner table as a kid.
Okay, guys, probably a little bit different to what you call a first world country over here in Australia. I was born and bred in Zimbabwe. It had its problems, so it was kind of not, money management wasn't something that was brought up very often. The job that my dad did, he was sort of a mine manager as such, and with his package, it sort of included housing, schooling, and a few other things. So in terms of money management, we never really had anything to really discuss in terms of mortgage payments or school fees or whatever it was, because it was all sort of included with his package. When there was sort of money spoken about over the table, it was kind of always none of the children's business, I guess, to some extent. It's probably the old school mentality. So that's kind of how I was growing up. So not too much exposure to money over the dinner table anyway.
Now, Brad, in terms of, give us a little context of the family unit. What, any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, so mum, dad, younger brother, younger sister, and obviously myself.
Yeah, okay. And obviously you're saying from Zimbabwe, right? So we know obviously some of the challenges that were being experienced over there, including you guys went through hyperinflation there in later sort of, or not, probably was it a decade or two ago. Did you get to experience that as well before you came over, or tell us what the situation was like before you migrated to Australia?
Yeah, very much so. So when we migrated as a family, I'd left high school. I was 19 years old. So I had a pretty good understanding of sort of what was happening in terms of inflation. Yeah, it was seriously hyperinflation. Prices on goods were sort of changing on a daily, if not on a weekly, if not a daily basis. It's funny, we kind of say people walk in with a wheelbarrow of money and walk out with a loaf of bread and milk. And that kind of wasn't too far from the truth. So yeah, that was sort of my experience. So there wasn't really any good points about money, I guess.
Just on that point, to give some context, because I was over there when hyperinflation was happening as well, Tell us, what was the largest denomination of one of your banknotes? This will be surprising for people to understand.
Oh my goodness! I think when I left, there would have been a $100,000 note, and this was the early 2000s, and it was honestly worth no more than $10 US.
There you go, $100,000 note. You know, we sit here and go, we very rarely see $100 notes, let alone $50 notes, and this is a $100,000 note. So that just gives you some context of what hyperinflation can do in a society. Now, let's bring it back to your story. You're migrating to Australia. You arrive in the mighty West. Tell us about how you got set up and sort of what did you have to do to integrate into society here, and then what's the money story attached to that?
So we were lucky enough to get over based on a point system. So my dad was a skilled worker. They required that skill. My mother was fortunate enough to have her sister live in Perth, up in the northern suburbs. So based on a point system, we got over the pass mark, immigrated across. We literally came over with a suitcase each, and I think, to note, about $5,000 US. So there wasn't a lot there. So it was a suitcase each, $5,000 US. We moved in with the auntie and the uncle. We spent our first few weeks there. It was funny, we kind of all speak English, but it was almost a different language, if you know what I mean. So you come across and you're having a chat to someone, but you're always misinterpreting how someone is saying something. So definitely a lot of challenges to overcome early in the piece.
What was the early settling like? I mean, you've obviously come with not much, and you're staying with parents, with family. What were some of those integrative first steps for you to establish in yourselves independently in this country? And what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome that people who live in this lucky country wouldn't have had to think about?
Yeah, so some of the real challenge that we had were, I guess, coming across and firstly, my dad finding a job, which I think he did within the first week. And then from there, he's sort of given myself and my brother, I was 19 at the time, my brother's 17, my sister went back to school. So there were sort of two options that he gave us. It was either do some study, do a trade, or go find a job. So my brother and I both went to go look for a job. Obviously, didn't have a resume behind us. All our schooling was back in Africa. And I actually door knocked my first job. So I think I borrowed, or my uncle gave me $5 for a train ticket to head off to Joondalup, Winton Road. I don't know if you're familiar with that. There's a whole little sort of light industry through there. I actually door knocked. I think I knocked on 3 doors. On the third door, I landed myself my first job. And then a real funny story is my brother. He sorted out an interview down in Perth. This was at a restaurant, sort of on the foreshore there. And again, my uncle's sort of given him $5, and he's going, okay, off you go. This is the direction. This is how you get to the train station, etc., etc. He's borrowed the push bike. He's headed off. He's lost his way to the train station. So he's decided to jump onto the freeway with the flow of traffic, rode his bike with no helmet all the way to Perth to get himself a job interview.
Tenacious.
That's tenacious. Hey, tell us about the job that you landed. What industry, what sort of work were you doing?
So it was a light making company, so aluminium framing with acrylic sheeting. You'll see them in shopping centres. So we used to put lighting on the framework, put a aluminium box around it, and then acrylic sheeting to go on top of it, and then that would portray people's advertising, I guess. So a lot light boxes essentially.
Yep.
And you mentioned, you said that I think you quoted that your dad said it's none of the children's business for the money. So, and it definitely was an older generation view. How did that sort of play out for you? Because clearly, if you have this disparity between older people and younger people and how they treat money, and then all of a sudden you just grow up a little bit and you get your job, you door knock. What did that look like when you first got to Perth? And when you first got that job, if it was there was no discussion around it, how did you learn your money management habits when you got your first paycheck?
It's funny, growing up, I always had a tenacity or a will to sort of try and save money. Because growing up, we didn't have a lot, I guess. So if you were given something, you would kind of look after it until it literally had no more use or no more life to the product. So I always had a very good understanding of not throwing away, not get too involved in consumerism, I guess. But in saying that, there were definitely challenges when we moved over here. Consumerism and whatever else is pretty full on with advertising and everything else. So initially, I probably spent week by week just because that's what everyone was doing, I guess. I got a really good bit of advice from my cousin. She's probably the same age. She is the same age, sorry. But her first bit of advice was to me, listen, your first paycheck you get, blow it, spend it on whatever you want. But every paycheck after that, try and save just a little bit. So I'll never forget that. That's almost 20 years ago that she gave me that advice. And I've sort of held on to that to this day.
So was there a budget though? Like, so you saved a little bit and then whatever's left over, was that just a rolling, keep spending it? Or did you start to create some categories of provision for, cars or whatever it is that were your major expenses at the time?
Yeah, so the term credit was never really thrown around growing up in Zimbabwe. You kind of just spent what you had, and when you ran out, that was it. So coming over here, credit was easy, I guess. So I would literally save a little bit and then spend the rest and then get credit to purchase a vehicle or purchase the new laptop or purchase the new phone. So I kind of thought I knew what I was doing, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I sort of got caught up in all of the fluffy, the stuff that comes with advertising, I guess.
Now, Brad, there's also something else that happens when you live in a society like that with hyperinflation. How much did you trust the banking system over there compared to the system that we had here, right? I mean, I'm assuming in most cases of my experience over there, people didn't bank their money. They kept it in safes and in certain places around the house. Tell us a little bit about that story and then relate that to your first pay packet and setting up your first bank account in Australia. Or did you, for a while there, put the money in the mattress?
Yeah, not far off. It was pretty much after my first week of work, because back in Africa, back where we were born, my dad was paid monthly. So this whole weekly payment sort of scenario was completely new to me. And I'd worked my first week and I sort of went up to the boss and I said, oh, listen, how do I get paid? I was that naive. So he goes, oh, you don't have a bank account? Sorry, no, I don't. So over the lunch break, we actually jumped in his car. He took me to one of the big four pillars and I set up my first bank account. And that's how I did it.
And so no looking at best product option, cheapest cost, most effective, just basically beginner's luck. Start with wherever the manager takes you. So you land in a big four. Now this is the interesting thing, because this is something that we also know about the statistics, and that usually is that the first bank that you bank with, you stay there for a long period of time. Tell us, are you still with that same bank, or have you moved, and how long did you stay there for?
Yes, that is a very good point. I started up with this bank, and back then the fees were exorbitant. At the time, you'd use, it's $1 here, it's $1 there. This day and age, it's just not the done thing. But this wasn't the only bank or institution doing this; it was everyone. But in saying that, I think I stayed with them for nearly 7 or 8 years before I sort of broke the shackles, looked at what else was out there, other products, etc., and went, yeah, no, there's far better products to go towards. But definitely got sucked into the advertising. They would send you these lovely letters in the mail going, oh, congratulations, you are now accepted for a $6,000 credit card or $10,000 credit card. And you think it's almost a gift. That's how they advertise it. So it was very, very clever in the way they do things.
Can we lean on one of the questions Ben just said before around trust and trust in the currency? Because in this country, that's not something that a lot of people need to think about. Like if they're carrying around a $100 note or a $20 note, they just have this born trust in that currency. Can you sort of give us a bit of an insight into what that looks like in terms of coming from a place that has hyperinflation, where the money doesn't mean anything? You use the wheelbarrow. Sometimes in some of these countries that have hyperinflation, they've got cash just in the drains in the street because it has such little value. What did that mean for you? And more to the point, what was the paradigm shift from seeing that and then seeing that in this country we're financially stable, we can trust our banks, and we can, for the better part, trust our currency?
Yeah, it was hard at first, especially when I went to the boss after that first week and said, listen, how do I get paid? And, you get deposited, it gets deposited into your bank account, you have a bank card, you put that in this machine, and out pops the money. And I kind of went home and spoke to the folks in the family. I thought, this just doesn't quite feel right. Yeah, it's obviously a trustworthy thing. It's how people do it every day, living day in, day out. But just that mental shift, it was really hard to sort of move into that mindset. So at the end of the week, I'll sort of go up to the ATM, plug in the card, take out all of the money, and then live on the cash for the week. So over the years, I sort of began to trust it, but early on, yes, it was pretty hard.
Wow. So talk us through the transition then. So at some point, you've trusted in the process, you've left some money in the bank, you're clearly a good saver. Well, you've been taught to save. So where was the first problem for you when it came to money? Did things go quite smoothly at that point, or did you hit a roadblock somewhere?
Yeah, so plenty of roadblocks. I bought a vehicle that was too expensive and very much overpriced, and that was all on credit. I just bought things for the sake of buying things, I guess, new and flashy, walk into Harvey Norman and new fancy things that you want to buy and whatever else. So I kind of got caught into the day-to-day of spending the paycheck. And I suppose the shift was the overall mind shift was when I sort of broke away with the groups I was hanging out with that had the same mindset. Once I met my now wife, partner, we've been together 11 years. Once I met her, moved into a different area, caught up with different people with a different mindset, that was kind of when I really had, that aha moment where I've gone, right, it is okay to save. It is okay to live within your means. It is okay to have delayed gratification. It was always hard in that other group I was in. It was always, you only live today, spend it today. What's the point of saving, but more so live today, enjoy it, because you never know when your last day is going to be. So I suppose breaking away from those shackles was when I am.
So do you put that down to the peer group pressure, Brad, or do you put that down to the lack of education and insight that you were given by your folks, given that money was a taboo subject? Do you think it's a combination of the two, or what sort of weighting would you give, the reason why you were acting and basically spending, on discretionary stuff that really didn't add any value to your life?
Yeah, so definitely not knowing. So education was a big factor. And also just the way I was brought up, I guess, all the people around us, just the way they went about their financial being and financial ways. So you're almost known as a tight ass if you try to save too much, or if you wouldn't go out for lunch 3 days a week, or go to the pub every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. So it was definitely education, not being aware of how finance worked, essentially. And also because of the way I was brought up and the people I was sort of hanging around. Like, I love my parents dearly, don't get me wrong, but their thoughts on finance and the way money management is done is completely the opposite to the way I now mentally think about how finance works or is done. So it's always a very touchy topic when it's brought up over the dinner table. So it's not brought up very often, but it was definitely a big factor, the people I hung around with, and education as well.
Can I lean into that just a fraction?
Sure.
I'm just, so why do you feel like it is still a touchy subject? Are they building for retirement now, or are they, given that they're obviously, aging and they've got to think about their future when they're not working, right? When they're not, physical exertion. Why is that such a sort of touchy subject?
Families, it's more so I can see the opportunity out there. My dad's got a very, very good job, earns a very good income, but there's nothing to show for it. So, because they're obviously your family, you care about your family. So when it comes up, it's probably brought up passionately in a good way. That's the way I sort of portray it, but they may receive it as in, it's our money, let us do what we want with it, I guess. So I sort of don't know how to break that down to them and help them understand that you need to work towards your retirement, because if you don't, that day is going to arrive and there could be nothing there in front of you.
Just to round out the backstory there, Brad, when you were talking about the peers and you're a bit of a tight ass and there was a bit of a culture around the people that you hang out with, was that other similar immigrants as you that had come from elsewhere? Was it birds of a feather flocking together when you went to Perth? Because I know a lot of the South Africans in Perth stick together, and a lot of the immigrant groups stick together. Were you with other people in similar situations, or were you mixing with sort of native West Australian community?
Yeah, so we were flocking, yes, correct, but not all to the same place. So I went to Brisbane, New South Wales, Victoria, Perth, New Zealand, overseas, UK, US. So we were all fortunate to get out of Africa. So it was, when I came across, we did hang around with people that were sort of from the same continent, I guess, to some extent. But my friendship group sort of was created through that first job that I had, through people that I met playing sport and stuff like that. So it was definitely a mixture, and it was very much a mentality of really good people, don't get me wrong, but just not savvy with their finance. And I almost felt
living for the now.
So I almost felt, I don't know, I felt like I was almost not excluded in any sense of way, but just because I wanted to save and they didn't, I thought, oh, surely there's got to be people out there that are like me, I guess, that want to build for their future. And I was lucky enough to find that later down the track, but I sort of had to go through that first, I guess, as a learning curve to really understand how to set yourself up for the future.
What was that? What was it? A person, a mentor, a book, or something? What was the trigger where you thought, oh, there are people like me, and that's the path that I want to go?
In all honesty, I would say my wife. We met 11 years ago, and we moved 40 k's away from my parents, my friendship group, and sort of moved into her friendship group. Got to know her parents and the way she was brought up, I guess. So once I broke that shackle of moving away, it was definitely the changing point. So I had the thought behind me that I always wanted to build that future, but this now gave me the opportunity to actually build it without feeling bad, or just knowing that other people do it.
So I want to pick up on that point in my second question, but my first question to you is around, there were a couple of false starts there too, in terms of, so you save a bit of a deposit for your first property, you decide to go into that property with your parents. What was the outcome of that for you? And there's also another little story in there as well before you meet your wife. So there's some lessons there that you want to share.
Yes, most definitely. So there was a small workplace accident that I had at my first job, and that allowed a payout about 25 grand, I think I got back in early 2000s, 2004. With that money, I put a deposit on a property with my parents. So we both signed into this mortgage. This is the house they still live in, which is great. With that though, sort of 6 years later, 5 to 6 years later down the track, I wanted to break away from it because there were times where they wanted to refinance, but refinance for the wrong reasons. So it was refinance to go on holiday or buy a boat or live in the now, where I wouldn't refinance, or if I did, I would refinance to improve the property and as such increase the capital on it. So with two completely separate mindsets, I sort of broke away from that. And it was sort of a lesson in that when I broke away from it, name off the title, I had to pay stamp duty. So some of that came off. And because it was family and because I didn't want to muddy the waters as such, I literally just asked for what I put in, I take out. And this was 6 years later. So there was no capital growth over that 6-year period whatsoever. So a very, very big lesson.
Would you do the same again if faced with what you know? Because you make a good point. It's not just a business transaction, it's family. There's emotion in there as well. So what would you do if faced with the same decision now?
Yeah, definitely keep ties separate. Emotions are a big factor when family's involved. And I literally walked away with what I put in, and that was just not to, like I said, muddy the waters or harm the longevity of the relationship. Because I'm obviously forever grateful for them bringing me over here to give me these opportunities. So I'll never forget that. But in the same token, I always want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. Having a young family now, I want to be building those stepping blocks.
Gotcha.
So property lesson number one, we allocate some money and it basically sits in a holding pattern and we pretty much get what we put in. So a big opportunity cost there in terms of money working harder for you. You've got a long-term partner at that point as well. So you sort of think about, okay, well, what did you do with that cash that you got out of that transaction with your parents?
Yeah, so I actually didn't learn from that first lesson because I went ahead and bought another property with my ex-partner, my long-term ex-partner. Things didn't work out. She held on to the property. My name actually wasn't on the title at that time, so I learned that lesson. But I think we didn't have that very long, maybe a couple of years. But what I put into that property, I walked out with the same amount again. So no capital growth over those next 2 years. And that was just, again, not to muddy the waters, walk away, keep it clean, and start again. So
there's a couple of points there, that not to muddy the waters, because technically you're in a de facto relationship. So whether you're on title or not on title, you're contributing to the property. You would still be able to have claimed some of the appreciation if appreciation had have occurred. But I think you're sort of saying clean break there. So we don't want the community thinking, or listeners thinking, wait a minute, if I'm not on title, I'm not entitled to any of the growth, even though I'm servicing the debt, I'm in a de facto relationship. So can you just clarify that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, sure. So it was just a clean break, essentially, just to start fresh. Let the past go. Yes, I would have been entitled to any capital gain, etc. But I broke those ties. She wanted to keep the property. I wanted to get out of the property. So it was just a clean break, essentially.
Was there any capital growth in it, Brad?
From what I can gather, I think there might have been.
Yep.
So I'm not sure on the finer details, but I think there would have been some capital growth.
Okay.
So you're out of that relationship. You've now got yourself a deposit. So what happens third time around with this deposit?
Yes. So I met my lovely wife. We both worked full time. I was on the mines at the time, earning a very good income. My wife is a full-time school teacher. So double income, no kids, essentially. And we sort of came up with this financial plan, which was to squirrel away everything that I earned, plus a little bit of hers, and live off what we thought was a fair amount without not being able to live life. So we did that for a few years.
And so you mentioned that when you moved away, 40 kilometres away, you got closer to your now wife's family. So what was money management like for her growing up? If you've had those conversations, but it sounds like you had this merging of worlds where her world was the money was easily controlled there, and you were positively influenced from that. So can you give us a little insight into what merging of those worlds were like for you?
Yeah, sure. So actually, my wife's parents live in South Australia country, but she was born and raised there. They've lived in the same family home their whole life. They went to the same schools. I think the mortgage was paid off fairly early. They were very good with money. So the conversations were almost really easy to have with the parents and with her, because we were also all sort of in the same mindset. So just having the thought that, yes, there are other people out there that set themselves up early, make sure that the pillars are there ready to go for retirement. So, yeah, it was sort of the joining of the two of us with their family as well, and her friendship group as well, that made it really easy for that phase of putting away as much as we could to set up our future.
So if you've got an income that's in the mines, which would have been significant, you're putting that away, and you've got this deposit back from the from the second property lesson. What was the next foray into property that you did with your wife then?
Yeah, so we rented inner city Perth for a couple of years. From there, we got married. I was lucky enough to stumble upon a career that I'm very passionate about. I'm a career firefighter, something that I love to do, something I love to go to every day. So from that, the income was halved when I joined the fire brigade. So, but because of all the hard work we'd initially put in, that allowed me to actually drop that high income, drop down to half wage, and then slowly build my way up as you progress into the fire brigade. So,
so you've saved up about $130,000 and you've gone shopping for a property. What sort of fundamental analysis did you use to where to buy the property, or what type of property to buy?
Yeah, so this is another lesson, I guess. This was pre-Property Couch advisory on where to purchase. This was even further away from the city, I guess. So sort of 45 to 50 Ks out of the city. And it was just a big subdivision in a settled area in a big subdivision. It was a mortgagee in possession, so we did well there. Probably location, not so much. So we used that deposit to purchase this first home. And that was going to be where we sort of, I guess, raised our children. And yeah, that's sort of where we got to after that bit.
So you paid, looking at some of the notes we've got here, you paid $455,000, and 4 years later you sold it for how much?
$434,000.
$435,000. So another 4-year window where, and doing all the right things in terms of your exertion, your wages and earning and saving. But unfortunately, it's just not materializing for you in terms of putting it into bricks and mortar yet. You are just, you've got the potentially control of money. You're looking at delayed gratification, but obviously there's the A, B, C, D here, right? And asset selection hasn't worked for you. So what did you do after you've got this 4 years? You sell that property for effectively a loss. What's next?
Yeah, so yes, effectively it was a loss, at a loss. My thought process, or our thought process, was if we sell low, we can buy low. And this was to upgrade to our now family home that I'm actually sitting in at the moment. So we lost 20 on that, but with the purchase of the property we're in now, I'm happy to say I'm finally on the upward trend here, and we're sort of up about 150. So a lot of losses with a little bit of capital gain finally coming through.
Which is phenomenal. So not only you're up 150, but you've also, true to your squirreling / saver nature, you've reduced the mortgage down significantly. So you've moved yourself into a strong position equity wise. So what is the next plan for you and your wife? I mean, you've clearly would have had to upgrade your thinking along the way as well to get to that position. So what's the next step for you?
Yeah, so effectively we don't owe a lot on this mortgage. The value would be low to mid sevens, and we've roughly got 10% of that owing on the mortgage. We actually ducked away after we bought this family home. We ducked away to the country for 3 years, rented out our PPOR, and we're lucky enough to have government regional officer housing in the country that we lived in. So essentially it was free rent with an income by being able to rent out our property here in Perth.
So taking advantage of the 6-year rule, you've been able to rent the property out because your work is... So this is the perfect terminology for the 6-year rule. Your work takes you to a regional area. You're able to take advantage of low rents because you're providing essential services out in those regions. You're getting rent coming on your principal home. It's paying down the mortgage for you. Hence, what you're saying, only 10% of the value of the home is now mortgaged. And here you are moving back into your family home, back in Perth, and we're now set up for the next phase. The next, and these steps are real now, right? I mean, ultimately, you're now in the accumulation phase. You need to be able to build off that. So what is some of the thinking around what is your next story? Because in reality, you could spend another 6 months or 12 months paying down that mortgage. But is that the best utilisation of the surplus income? What's your thoughts on that, Brad?
Yeah, so it's a nice thought to have a house paid off and be essentially mortgage free, but I know that's probably not the way to go if we want to be setting up those pillars and building real future wealth for my family. So we're looking at essentially, I like getting my hands dirty. I'm actually in the property at the moment, fixing it up, getting it ready to move back into. So a fixer-upper of some sort would be my thought, and rent that out as an investment. But I'm just really concerned at the moment with the hot property market that we've got. So that's kind of what's holding us back essentially at the moment. So I'm not sure if it's worth waiting another 12 to 24. Happy to invest borderless, as you would get us to do. But yeah, just sort of stuck in a bit of a crossroads, but in a good crossroad, I guess. So having a bit of money in the offset there to be able to do something, but just not sure just yet.
Hey, Brad, I'd like to ask, lean in on that question around waiting 12 to 24 months, because quite often a lot of people have a similar thought process. Can I get a bit of an understanding on where the benefit in your mind would be for waiting 12 to 24 months? What if, let's say we fast forward 24 months, what would you have hoped to have happened in that time to help with some of the uncertainty in your thinking now?
Yeah, so that's probably a bit of procrastination for me, in all honesty. Now's the time to do it, but for some reason, I'm just held back a little bit. I almost just want to get the family back and settled, start the new year. Both kids will go to full-time school next year, and then sort of take it from there. But sort of that 12 to 24 months, I suppose, is just a bit of a cop-out, I guess, essentially, instead of just acting now.
Incredibly brave for you to say that, right? Because quite often people aren't that forthright in saying, I'm a little bit fearful around what's going on. So I am using an advanced technique to procrastinate and thinking that, there's a lot going on. Because, Ben and I have had a number of podcasts where we say that we think that this decade offers a wonderful opportunity for people in this country to stake their claim on real estate in this country, because the conditions are really great for continued growth over time. Now, we have been through a hot market, so there's no doubt about that. And for people who don't have any experience in this market, it is overwhelming. So I'm certainly happy to acknowledge that that's the case. But I think the biggest thing for you, Brad, is to be really clear with yourself and your wife around what the flag on the top of the mountain looks like. And we've said this a couple of times, but that becomes, if you listen, I know you're a listener of our podcast, and you'll hear Ben referring to North Star a lot. We use that in our private dialogues within our own business. And it clearly gives you a really considered plan on where you need to go, because your equity is strong. I don't know what your income is, but you've built yourself up. There's double incomes. There's children in the mix as well. But it sounds like there's potentially some good opportunity there for you. But it's around making sure that we're comfortable within our own self, because if we've just listened to your backstory and it's had some real nuances in it, and even to the most fundamental core of trusting the currency, right? But if from what we've learned from you is, if you have a real clear vision on where you're going, it'll actually help you with some of that procrastination, because it gives you real clarity on what the next step is. Because Ben and I have been doing this for well over 20 plus years, and it's actually ridiculously simple how easy it is to shore up your financial future. There is zero rocket science in what you need to do, but most of it happens between our ears and getting really clear and confident around that. But because a lot of people invest in property and they don't know what that North Star is, so therefore they're susceptible to the winds of change that happen at the time. So it's clear that if you can root that foundation in money management, you clearly have changed your story around being able to save. But you're not going to save your way to retirement. You've just hinted at that. If you pay off the mortgage, it's not going to be the best opportunity for you. So I think for me, the starting point for you, Brad, is to get a little bit clear around what that lifestyle design looks like. What do you need? How much do you need? What does it look like? So that then you can get some clarity around what you need to do. Because it seems to me, if you can get that clarity, you've clearly demonstrated that you're mentally tenacious as well as physically tenacious, just through changing careers, working your way up in the fireys, all the stuff that you've learned, going against the conditioning of your parents. How does that resonate for you in terms of what would be your next step?
Yeah, so definitely in a much stronger mindset. I guess that comes with age. There's a bit of resilience there going through moving countries and whatever else. So we're set up to take that next step. It's probably me more so that really needs to jump ahead and actually take that step. So I guess next step would be to get a bit of advice, I suppose, on exactly what to do. I definitely want to be in the property game. That's something I see, as a physical asset, it's always nice to look at. But it's always something that there's going to be growth, there's going to be opportunities, etc. So, just really want to work forward towards making a plan and sticking to it, essentially.
Brad, can I just jump in there? Because as Bryce says, we've been doing this for a long time, right? We've been fortunate enough to guide people along on a journey. So I want to lean in on a couple of important points, right? But I also want to give you a summary of the things you want to consider when you go out to get that advice. And I'm going to use one of our frameworks, really simply, our ABCD, right? From what you've just told me, because we haven't done an exhaustive understanding of that, but let's start with C, cash flow management. What you need to do is just make sure that you can work out those surpluses that are coming through based on the two household incomes. So that's just the first bit of preliminary work that you can do. When you get more advanced around private schools and all the other big ticketing items and the big rocks in the jar and all of that, that will then influence that story, right? So the narrative around cash flow. Then we look for B, borrowing power. So let's go and have a look and talk to an investment savvy mortgage broker and get a sense in terms of what is our borrowing power. Then it comes down to asset selection. Now, a couple of things you've given us clues on around asset selection is basically you're good with your hands. You're also a fireman, so you're 2 days on, 2 days off. So adding value to an asset also plays into that conversation. And then the final thing you were talking about is defense, which also contradicts procrastination. So when you contradict procrastination, basically it is about taking action. Now, given that you know that property prices are moving pretty quickly, understand this, and that is that the land value is the thing that's going to appreciate over time. So rather than waiting 12 or 24 months, what you may want to consider, and again, without giving you formal advice, what you may want to consider is this factor, and that is that with your hands and you turning old apple pies into new apple pie in terms of making that home a better home, look for properties that you can potentially add cosmetic or at least some sort of improvement to that's at your skill level. And I think in your case, because you're thinking about borderless investing, but Western Australia and Perth is potentially going to be one of the better markets in terms of where you can execute on this. So you can take advantage of your labour in terms of being able to make that happen. So for me, they are some of the starting points. But Bryce finishes off that. And then the defence piece for us is, what is the end game? What are you doing about that? And there's also a defence piece in respect to you adding value to the property. So buy that ugly duckling and turn it into a reliable and durable or a sensible home. Don't go over the top. Remember, this is an investment property. And they are some of the foundation principles that you should be looking at as part of executing on the next stage. Because we love the fact you've come on this podcast and you've opened up and you've basically talked and you've made a big transition. But the final transition, the final missing piece for you is action on accumulation. You've lost 10 years in terms of the executions that you've done based on that. So getting that advice, painting that story, plan to become what you plan to become, and you're going to make it. This is about, if we look at our 5-step process in terms of clarify, evaluate, plan, implement, and manage, we see clarify and evaluate as potential and opportunity. And you have that in spades right now. So it is about executing into a plan and then effectively taking action on that, and then ongoing management, and then, continuing to review that. And they are our two big frameworks. And you've just allowed us to share that with you in a very simplistic form. But, all credit to you to be where you are and to share that story with us today. But that's your next piece. We've got to move past. And that's a bit of work on confidence, mindset, but make the invisible visible. Do that cash flow analysis and then start to do your research and all the fundamentals that we talk about. Don't go to big areas where there's lots of vacant land. Stick to the basics. Buy that tired asset that might be built in the 70s or the 80s at that low entry level. Doesn't have to be in the most affluent markets, because that land appreciation still occurs in those areas, and you're gonna put the effort in, and you'll get the reward.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
So, Brad, you've listened to us for a little while now. Can I just get a sense of where the Money Smart system fits in your thinking around making sure that you're trapping all that money and getting the house in order around setting up your basic finances? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, so Money Smarts is something I have looked at. It's something I sort of log into and will update. It's just good to see an overall picture of sort of where you lay. I guess it's a nice visual way to understand where you're at. So I'm not very active in regards to Money Smarts. We do have a system that we use here at home, but in terms of Money Smarts, it's a really nice way just to get an overall umbrella view of how things are going.
And how much do you differentiate between the basics of Money Smarts around having that 7-day float and parking all your money in offset? Is your system similar to that, or is there a fair bit of difference?
Yeah, so ours is very basic. So there's a financial institution that we use. We both get paid into this institution. From there, savings or income or whatever goes into our offset account. All of the money sits in the offset, and we have a balance left on this other institution where we use for our daily spending. We utilise our credit card, but that gets swiped every month to ensure that we don't pay any interest. So very simple, very basic. If there's money in that account, that's our money to spend on groceries, whatever else. And then we've got the other account with the offset and the credit card to use for bills, anything that comes up that needs to be repaired, car repair, etc.
And Brad, with that other float that you're running, so it's similar. Are you running a 7 or 14 day or 21 day, or as the money's coming in, that's constantly topping that up because it's basically unallocated money? Is that how you use it? So all the other money that you're putting in the offset has a job to do, but you're allocating an amount of money. What's the sort of cycle of that amount of money that's sitting in that secondary account?
Yeah, sure. So I get paid on a weekly basis. My wife gets paid on a fortnightly basis. From there, every week, a portion of that would go into the offset account, which services the mortgage, etc. And then the same thing for my wife. And then there's a simple balance left over that weekly. So it's essentially, we're using a weekly and a fortnightly, but there are sums that allow us that balance left.
Brad, I put the call out to our community to say, come on the Summer Series and share your story with us. What triggered you to want to do that? Why? And you've been wonderfully transparent. I think there's a heap of nuggets that people can take away. But what was it that triggered you to say, yes, I'm going to come on and share my story? Because it's a brave thing to do. And what did you hope to get out of it, or what sort of questions did you hope that Ben and I might be able to help you with as a result of doing it?
Yeah, so essentially the reason I came on is because I was in that headspace that I see a lot of other people in that financial headspace, and it's not a great place to be. It's everyone's doing it, so it must be okay, but it's not okay. And if I can just sort of put that story out that, listen, I came from that mental headspace that, yes, there were some lessons learned along the way, but you can completely turn yourself around and change the way you think financially, mentally, etc. So I'm just hoping people out there can understand that, you can be caught in the rat race, the day-to-day living, the day-to-day spending, but there is a way of you being able to transform your life essentially and go the other way.
Yeah, good on you. I think you'd be really surprised at some of that vulnerability that you showed, how much that will empower people who are listening to this, because quite often, particularly in a hot market like ours, people can listen to this and just lose a bit of hope. And it's really refreshing to hear someone who said, here's my property lesson number 1, it wasn't good. Here's my property lesson number 2, it wasn't good. But here's how I've reclimbed the mountain, and here's what I plan to do about it. And here's the adjustments that I made in my thinking, and here's the people that I'm associating with, and I can turn this around. And I really want to pick up on that point and share that to anyone who's listening to this now, who may be able to relate to some of that frustration that might have come from having a painful money story, and now hearing that you've had one and it's now turning into a pleasurable money story. I really want to lean in and encourage those people that are hearing that part of your story, just to say there is hope, there is things that you can do. Don't necessarily compare yourself to others, and don't be discouraged by this market, because there are things that you can do to make sure that you can participate if you have a plan, you have a vision, you have a direction that you want to go in, and that you're not going to be easily bumped off track. So we appreciate you coming on to the summer series, Brad. It's been fabulous to chat with you. We could see you there renovating. You're on your phone. Some of the internet signal was a bit patchy at times, but we got the gist of your story. And on behalf of everyone here on the Property Couch, thanks for coming on the summer series.
No, thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Fantastic. Look, this is another story for me, Bryce, around taking chances, migrating to another country, seeing opportunity, but also bringing with that, some of the baggage that also comes along with that program, right? So, not being on the same page with your parents, being, again, sort of breaking that anchor, that mooring line that's holding you back, and trying to find those discoveries. But it's also a case of new freedoms, new opportunity, and trying to fit in, with lifestyles that are going on over here, and buying things and thinking about the now rather than the past. All of those things have woven in to Brad's life. And then he's gone about resetting that. So for me, this is a reset to relaunch sort of story. And so I took a lot away from, and again, a lot of confidence away from the fact that you can turn it around. You can go from uneducated or, an enthusiastic amateur, and you can turn that into someone who's getting educated and ready to make the next step on his story. So he's now at that sort of financial stability, financial control, ready to take the next leap towards financial peace. So that's a good news story for Brad, and sharing that for the community can only get those takeaways. And this is why we love Summer Series, because you get that opportunity to people can relate to your story, and hopefully it allows them to take action.
It does, Ben. And interesting part of that conversation too was just to hear from someone that maybe a lot of people in this country couldn't relate to, not having trust in their currency.
Yeah,
because
in their banking system.
we're blessed here, right? Like, it's not even something that you have to think about, really.
Yeah.
It's not until in the last few years that I've really started to think about currencies around the world and what impact that has. But here's someone who was in a hyperinflation environment where the trust in the currency was very, very low. And then that shift of thinking towards that as settled into Australia, and the time it took to just get that trust, which I thought was just amazing. But another example of a conversation over the dinner table when they were young. And to quote, it was none of the children's business to know about money. And yours and my mission is to encourage our community to talk to their kids about money. So hopefully they can see through our summer series, we will have people who had lots of conversations with their parents early, and you actually see what that happens down the line. And then you also see when there's no conversations early, what that has down the line as well. But,
and Bryce, just sorry for the community. Apologies about the audio. It wasn't ideal. We understand that. We just had a bit of internet problems. We promise that we'll pick up the game on the audio side for the next few on the summer series. So I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, well,
that we acknowledge that it was a bit rough there.
Well, it's a good point, because Brad was actually in his house renovating on his smartphone, and then the internet was cutting in and out a little bit. So the wonders of doing stuff online is amazing at times, Ben. But you're right, there was a couple of little patchy spots there. But mate, it was wonderful to have this conversation. And mate, I don't think I want to hang out with you anymore this year. I think I'm done with you.
Oh,
so,
how about next year?
All right, I'll hang out with you next year. But clearly that's the segue, Ben, that we're done for the year.
Okay, everyone back to knowledge is empowering, please. We're ready to start acting on it. Christmas is over. Let's move on.
But mate, I hope you've got some ripper plans just to hang out with your crew as we sign in the new year, and to everyone in our community. Hope you have a wonderful time, whatever it is that you're doing as you sort of look back on 2021. Hopefully with a lot of positivity, but for some of you, you may be happy to get rid of it. But mate, Happy New Year to you for this end of this year, and until next week, you're sort of suggesting people start getting back on the horse.
I reckon we can start getting back on the horse. Knowledge is empowering. Time to act.
time to act. All right, folks, we'll see you next year.
Hey guys, Bryce here again. Just want to catch you before you go and let you know, if you're new to our community, there are a lot of episodes to catch up on, but it's really important that you start from the very beginning at episode number 1, because episode 1 through to 20 share all of the foundational pillars and frameworks that you need to know to get the best out of listening to this podcast. So I'd recommend that you start there, and the little tip is to maybe start on 1.5 speed. Now, for those of you that are time poor and don't have time to go back from the beginning, don't worry, we've got you covered as well, because we've created a binge guide that goes through all of the details and makes it easy for you to read and get up to speed very, very quickly. So if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, you will be able to download that binge guide and you will be up to speed in no time. And whilst you're there, I've got a few extra goodies for you, because we have our top 5 frameworks that you'll learn on this podcast, as well as the Make Money Simple Again ebook, which will help you with the foundations of basic money management, so you'll have everything you need to succeed in building your own lifestyle design and getting the best out of this podcast. Now, just a reminder that anything that we cover on this podcast is not considered financial advice. We certainly recommend that you get your unique circumstances looked at by your individual advisor, and everything we talk about is just general in nature. To thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, and you can go and get all those goodies and catch up right away.